Welcome back, everyone, to episode 2 of Match Play. I am Stephie Smalls. This is my co-host, Spencer Aguiar, who I woke up very, very early this morning because I had to push the show up. So I apologize. Are you awake? Are you excited to talk about golf with me?
I'm always excited to talk about golf, and I'm always excited to do this show with you, Stephie. So it should be a good tournament. Like we were talking about it a little bit before we went on air. Probably not the most star-studded field that you're ever going to see. We do have a couple names at the top that are worth discussing, but nonetheless, it's going to be a fun tournament. It's a good golf course.
It is. I feel like right now I need to take a little victory lap for our first one and done. I did beat you. You picked our guy, Jason Day, who sadly disappointed us a little bit in this tournament. Victor Hadwin pulled it out, couldn't quite finish things off there. And also, Waller, how are you feeling about Darren? I know this is a golf show, but I got to get a quick reaction from you.
So I don't know what the Raiders are doing in general right now. And I give that answer under the context of last year we're all in apparently when we trade for Davante Adams. This year, like we're kind of in the middle with everything. And I understand that there's like a stylistical problem that comes into play once we got Jacoby Myers there. Waller does a lot of work in the slot. Jacoby Myers is going to be playing the slot for us a bunch. Renfro's a slot guy primarily. The one thing I will say to that is I'm not so sure Jacoby is as much slot oriented as everybody thinks he is. That kind of became more of a thing when McDaniels left the Patriots. I think they're going to work him all over the field, and it's kind of like the same way that they play Davante Adams, where he works all over the field. So I'd like to have thought that Waller would have been able to play and fit on that team, but like it comes down to it at the end of the day. McDaniels is a real system coach and he wants system players with him. And it kind of goes back to the same sentiment that I've been saying with Garoppolo versus Carr. Carr is a better quarterback. Like I know like people don't necessarily want to give him credit for that. Garoppolo will probably fit the system better, but I don't know. I am not thrilled with what's going on there. And Waller, when he's healthy, is a phenomenal player. So I think you guys got a good one there. Little bit sad for Daniel Bellinger for my dynasty.
I know, me too, fantasy purposes, but no guaranteed money and no cap hit next year. I'm okay with that. If we can move on from him, if he can stay healthy, awesome. But let's talk about golf because that's why we're here. Valspar Championship, like you said, not exactly the most exciting field, but I will say it's not as weak as we've seen it. It's a little bit stronger of a field. You see some of the top names that we all love playing. It takes place between these two back-to-back designated events. You have guys like Thomas who are skipping the match play because they feel like they have a very good shot at this course. Talk to me about the course. What were the things you were looking for immediately right off the bat with your model?
Yeah, so we have Innisbrook Resort. That's Copperhead, 7,340 yards. It's a par 71. Very similar concept that we talked about last week with these overseeded Bermuda greens. So that's going to be your Poa Trivialis is what it's called. That's at TPC Scottsdale, as I mentioned last week at TPC Sawgrass, PGA West, TPC San Antonio. We don't see it very often, but it comes into play because of the dormant Bermuda. Like we have to overseed it or it's not going to be playable in that sort of a context there. As you might expect, there are going to be similarities that come into play from a macro sense of the word when comparing this course to the past few Florida courses that we've seen. That's going to be primarily the wind, the water-bound nature that comes into play. But I want to note that while the venue is geologically located in the same state, the tangible feel of the property gives us a much different style of golf than we've seen over the past few weeks. That's going to come down to the tree line nature of the setup. So you have these 24-yard, and it's even a little bit less this year, average fairway width. The rough is going to exceed 3 inches. That condenses the grounds down into this compact off the tee test. And really the one thing that highlights more than anything and makes it the one key variable that I believe everybody needs to look into whether you're building a model or just trying to figure out who you want to play this week is the driver is removed from a player's repertoire. So, golfers are going to be required to work the ball in both directions. I do think because the driver gets out of play, you get a lot of reduced layups. That's sneakily going to add hidden distance to the track that we might not see up front. And then we talk about the holes. There's an abnormal 5 par 3s. Those are going to stretch over 190 yards, so long iron proximity. All the par fives are extremely lengthy. And then when we add that mixture of those two factors and the variety of the par 4 holes that we're going to get, which there is a big variety of them, like we have some that are less than 400. The more difficult ones are going to stretch over 450 yards. That's going to be where the forced layups kind of make this difficult with the long iron play coming in. But kind of all those reasons together is why we have 67.8% of second shots that take place from 150 yards and beyond. So for me, when I'm looking at a model, I want long iron proximity players. I want good drive percentage, quality short games because of the way that this is set up with the rough and everything. And, it's going to kind of start pushing you into a test that I think is going to be much more difficult than we've seen in the past couple years. We've gotten back-to-back 17 under par winners from Sam Burns. I would be shocked if we push anywhere near that. Like, to me, this is I hate giving like projected totals of what I think the score is going to be, but it's going to be between 8 under to 12 under, in my opinion. So it's going to play substantially easier in my mind.
Well, you're pretty right, because we were pretty on the dot with the players. We both thought that score was going to be vastly different than a lot of people were saying it did. Yeah. Scotty ended up being 17 under, he finished, right? Yeah. Yes. So that could very much be the case. I trust you when it comes to the score because you nailed it last week. We'll see if you could do it again. I think this course is going to favor, players, like their approach, scrambling, par 5 scoring, all those things. But again, like you can kind of take out off the tee to some extent, except for the fact that, you do have the very narrow fairway. So that makes things a little bit more difficult. Right off the bat, was there one guy, like who was your first click? I'm betting on him no matter what.
Well, when I ran the numbers, there was one golfer that just popped up immediately, and I grabbed him first thing on Monday. I got him at 70-1. That would be Steven Jaeger. It's moved a little bit since I've taken him. I think anything over 50-1 is still an extremely intriguing value because of the upside portion of my model. That's not something I typically find on Jaeger when I run my math, but I got this highly enticing return for his strokes gain total when I recalculated the metrics. That placed him 8th overall for the week. And, I talked about this on the show last week. So I will run things out for a generic course. That's just like any generic course on tour that's going to be played. And then I'll run out the same exact metrics specifically for the course that is going to be played. So that's going to talk about all the stuff that I just went over, the good drive percentage, the long iron proximity, the short game. He jumped up into 8th in my model and projected strokes gain total. That's a really big increase. That's a 21 spot improvement over his baseline projection for me. And I kind of think that this might be the best pure value on the board when we're talking about actual equity to win this event. There's going to be volatility. Sure, he can miss the cut. I mean, it's Steven Jaeger at the end of the day. It's not like some shoo-in that it's going to be safe. But I think when we're looking at high upside sort of bets, whether that be, I have a top 5 bet on him, a top 10 bet on him, a top 20 bet on him. As David said, Jaeger is somebody that I am all over this week in every single capacity.
Yeah, Jaeger, here's the thing about Steven Jaeger. I had him on my season long last year, and he was a very frustrating player. And now I have not so nice feelings towards him because he would very much show glimmers of a lot of hope, play some good golf, and then he would miss the cut. And you're like, I can't stand you right now. I think I did see Jaeger. There was a top 20. I think I saw it at plus 280. That's something that I would be interested in with Jaeger, but more just because he's burned me, I can't bet him, but I love that he's popping up for you. One of the guys, and this is again, like I'm not seeing him on people's cards. This is going to be your standard, like Smalls just going to bet this guy because she wants to bet this guy, is Denny McCarthy. I think this guy has been flirting with a win for so long now. I just feel like it's coming. Is it necessarily going to come at like the 5th hardest course? No, it's not necessarily going to come here. I'm still going to bet him because you're going to get numbers on these guys. You don't need to, in a weaker field like this, you don't always have to go for just the top guys. There's some shots from different guys. So, he's 12th in scrambling season. I mentioned before, that's something that I really looked at when I was looking at these guys. He's made the cut in like each appearance here over the last 5 years. He's one of the better putters actually in the field. And his approach game is like improving enough where I feel comfortable putting some money on him. Will he burn me and will I be upset? Because he's also on my season long, and I love to take my season long guys because it's like a double win if I win. Like Scotty last week, he's on my season long. I love that because then I get to reap the benefits of my cash out and also make fun of my league in email thread later. But Denny McCarthy was one of the first guys that came to me. I bet you were about to rip him because I can imagine in your model he did not look pretty.
So I want to go back to the first comment that you said about him. This might be the prototypical course that I would actually expect him to win at. That doesn't mean that I have a wager on him, but I guess the one negative thing that, like, I'm very numbers driven, and the reason why McCarthy never grades well for me just comes down to the weighted proximity, specifically when we look from 150 plus yards. That is my biggest concern. He's 115th in my model in weighted proximity from 150 plus yards. That's a problem. I mean, there's no other way around that. Now, the key that might be different for him, he's been trending a little bit with the irons. I've seen some improvements from him. The short game is immaculate. I mean, he is one of the best short game players in the entire PGA Tour. 22nd in my model in strokes gained total here around the green. The putting is pretty much within the top 10 of this field, no matter how I want to look at it, whether that's strokes gained putting, Poa Trivialis putting, fast greens putting over the last 24 rounds. Like, all of those metrics put him third in my model for weighted putting here. He's a good win player, and I tend to think that McCarthy's best chance to win might come at one of these tests that plays between the 8 under to 12 under mark. Just because if, like, the capacity happens or the capabilities happen that he gets hot with the putter, all of a sudden he can work himself up the leaderboard. I think he's a safe play to me. Like, to me, he feels like a nice head-to-head target. He feels like a guy who can come in the top 20. I don't know if I necessarily think he's going to win, but if he is going to win a tournament, there are a lot of worse events out there that I would have penciled in. Like, this is one of the more likely ones in my eyes.
Yeah, for sure. I got him when it opened at 40 to 1. I think that number has come down to 35 to 1. So just a little bit there. I think that he'll probably find himself in a lot of these finishing positional parlays that I tend to do. I had a pretty good week with those last week, but I also feel like I had a little bit better of a read on this course and on that course and on that field than I do this week. This week is a little bit more fun, especially with free agency, March Madness, everything going on. Going to have a little bit of fun with this weaker field. You mentioned the wind. Talk to me a little bit about the weather, what you're expecting, and then we'll get into some of these smasher passes with some of our favorite placements.
So, I kind of alluded to this on the show. I'm not necessarily the biggest proponent of weather unless we're talking about showdown with this. Like, I think the wind matters, but we even saw it come into play last week at the Players Championship that people built lineups one way, and then all of a sudden play got stopped, and then everybody had to come back out on Saturday. I know that was because of thunderstorms there. I think at the end of the day, like, when I build this from a extended point of view of it, I try to find quality win players that are going to be good throughout any duration of time of it. And then obviously things will change as the week goes on. And, like, we're getting better weather reports, and we'll have better weather reports even in the next, 6 to 12 hours as we're trying to make DFS lineup decisions here. But, I can tell you in my model who the top couple win players are, because that's probably an important thing to at least point out, to where,
Absolutely.
If you're trying to figure out who's not going to get themselves blown off the course when the wind does come into play. So, number 1, Justin Thomas. Number 2, Sam Burns. It probably makes sense why Burns is so good in Florida. And we know that from Thomas historically. Like, we've seen him in the wind before, just the creativity that he has on shots. Jordan Spieth, number 3, Matthew Fitzpatrick, number 4, Brian Harman, number 5. And then I guess, your boy, just to throw it out there, Denny McCarthy is 10, but Lee Hodges is 6 for me. Which, that's a random name that I haven't heard too many people talk about this week.
Interesting. Lee Hodges. That's something to look into, actually. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the wind affects it. I try not to, take weather too much into account. Sometimes you have to, but with golf, it's something that you really have to watch, closer to the day of, before tee off happens.
Just really quickly on that stuff, when I'm building DFS lineups, if we're talking DFS for a second, I usually find who I want to play. Like, I'll narrow it down into a specific group of people. And that might be an extended group. Like I'll end up cutting it a little bit from there. So if I'm going to play, let's say 20 to 25 people in my player pool, I'll have 30 or 35 players there. And then that's kind of where the win becomes the decision for me. If there's anybody on the fence, if I'm trying to decide between two guys, that's where I start cutting players out from the mix there. I try to never eliminate anybody solely because of one end of the weather draw.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's good background for that too. It's going to smash or pass. One of the guys you mentioned before that is again beloved. We know that this course is very repeatable, as people continue to say. It's all over Twitter this week. So Mr. Bermuda Burns, he's right now 16-1. I have my own feelings about it. I recognize that this is a course he continuously plays very well. He's gained 5+ strokes putting at this event in each of his first 4 appearances. In his 4 appearances, what is he? T12, T30, and 2 firsts. Do I think he's going to repeat winning again? No, I just don't. I do believe in odds, and some things need to come to an end. That's one of those things that's going to come to an end. Sam Burns is not winning again. I promise you that. And he's continuously made the cut here. For that reason, I'm out. But are you smashing or passing on Sam Burns?
If we're talking about this from actually winning the event, I am going to pass, and I'm going to pass for some of the reasons you said. And then the one thing that I want to throw into there, the iron play is not exactly what we saw these past 2 years of him coming here winning it. So he's 66th in my model in weighted proximity from over 150 yards. He's 85th from 200 plus yards. That worries me a little bit. Like, obviously he can putt. We know he's one of the best putters in the world here. I wouldn't be shocked if he gives you a quality performance. I do think we saw some things last week that would be encouraging moving forward for him. But no, I mean, at the 16-1 price, and I kind of will give this answer about everybody at the top of the board for me, I'm going to be passing when it comes to outright bets on every single player. That would be, I guess, let's say sub 40-1, I guess. Like, to me, the golfers that are the most intriguing, and I'll just quickly name them, and this would be from an in-tournament betting perspective, would probably be Justin Thomas. If we can get a number on him at some point, it would be Justin Rose, depending on where that number ends up going after Thursday. And I kind of like Adam Hadwin. Like, I have no intrigue of betting him at 25-1, like at least when this event opens, but let's see where that number goes as of Thursday. Like, Burns last year steamrolled this leaderboard on Sunday once weather came into play. There's obviously a lot of wind and water at this course. You can make up strokes in a hurry here. So those are the 3 guys that I'm going to be most intrigued to see where those numbers end up. But no, at 16-1 on Burns, I'm going to be out.
Yes, I am with you on that. He's another one of these darlings. I saw David in the chat say it plus 330 to miss the cut for Sam Burns. That's actually something that I probably would rather sprinkle on than taking a shot at him outright. I think there's a higher chance that he actually misses the cut. Again, all good things have to come to an end. Unfortunately, I think for Bermuda Burns, that might be the case this week. Let me throw one more at you, and then I'll let you take over from here. Okay, interesting. Another name, and I tried to find for this week, like, the names that you're not hearing a lot of. I think it leads to better discussion anyways, but Alex Smalley, another one of these guys that I just love. I love him. I think that you could play this a bunch of different ways. I think he's another guy that kind of flirts in the beginning of the weekend. Like, he's someone I am very interested in for first round leader. And then you kind of see him trickle off and miss the cut, depending on what it is. You can get him top 40 for plus 140, top 20 plus 360, depending how crazy you want to get. Nothing really pops out about Smalley. He has 2 top 10 finishes this season. He's not even coming in great form, but he is top 10 in par 5 scoring, and he is top 10 in strokes gained on approach. So I think there's things to like, and if he puts it together, and he can not have a very cold putter, maybe he puts himself in a conversation where he's looking at a top 40, top 20. Smash or pass, Alex Smalley.
I always say smash to Alex Smalley, and I actually have a lot of wagers on him this week, so I'll very quickly go through a couple of them. I have him top 20 at 4-1. I have him top 10 at 9-1. You talked about the first round leader bet. I took him at 80-1. I also bet him to win this tournament at 100-1. So I kind of think there's a lot to like about him. Like there's 3 golfers to me this week that I have the most exposure to. It would be Steven Yeager, it would be Alex Smalley, and it's going to be Taylor Moore, which we can get to in a second on the smash or pass for you on this. But, when we look at Smalley specifically, I think he's regressed some statistically, at least from the expectations that my model had for him in the fall. Like my model believed he was a top 40 golfer in the entire world. Like forget in this field. I don't know if we've necessarily gotten those expectations from him to start this season. I still think he's a great total driver with quality long iron proximity numbers. But really the concerns for me, and it's going to continue to be the concerns for me here, is how can he perform on these par 5 scoring tests? I've always said that I prefer him in a par 70 test for that reason, where he only gets 2 instead of 4. Although I'm slightly more intrigued here since the around the green portion of his game has been trending over the past 24 rounds. You're telling me that the long irons look good. The around the green game has gone from something that is a big question mark to something that's been inside the top 40 for me in this field. That's how players can start working themselves up the board in capacities that maybe they weren't before. It's like the skill set that wasn't working is now performing. The other stuff will turn around. We know that the other aspects of his game that maybe have gone south will return. I have the historical data from him being on the PGA Tour that has said he is a certain, X number on all of these stats. He's below the baseline there and above the baseline in stats that I don't necessarily expect. That's usually where you get winners. And it's like a similar mentality takes place with guys that are, like I think Justin Thomas is a really good example of this. Like I keep going back to him, but like Thomas is a guy who ball strikes the ball really well. And the putter is always bad. And then the one time that he performs with the putter, he wins the event. Now, Smalley doesn't have that sort of an upside, but it's like the reverse of that. Now, all of a sudden, the ball striking isn't what it has been for Smalley, at least not at the level that my model anticipated. You're telling me that at some point it's going to pop again and the around the green game ends up putting up a category or a number that I think is doable. Then you get the top 10s, you get the top 5s, you get the victories. So it's going to be a volatile wager. That's the reason why I played it as a top 20 and a top 10 instead of a top 40 here. But I like the upside of Smalley, and I do think he wins an event on the PGA Tour within, I don't know, the next 2 years, and it could very well come here.
Today we learned that Match Play is also, not only are we a pro Jason Day podcast, we are now a pro Alex Smalley podcast. He will be sponsoring this podcast without his consent or knowledge. He will be our highlight of the week. I think I could probably get there with just sprinkling a little bit on an outright, but I think any place for positional, you got a better number there on top 10 than I did. I'm a little bit jealous, but I think he's someone that it's definitely worth looking at. Maybe an interesting play in DFS too. I'm not sure what his ownership is going to look like, but what do you have for smash or pass here?
So I guess let's talk about Taylor Moore just because I do have so much exposure to him, and we'll like I have an outright on him at 75-1. I also then have the top 20 at plus 320, top 10 at 7.5-1, and the top 5 at 16-1. What are your thoughts on Taylor Moore this week, smash or pass?
You're bringing up all the guys that I had on my season long that burned me and I hate them. But I don't hate them. I love you, Taylor Moore. But yeah, I don't feel strongly. I think I could see him very much finishing in the top 10, something that I could definitely see. But again, like he just feels so volatile to me. I'm sure you're going to explain to me why he can win this, no problem. But Taylor Moore, I think he's someone that I would look at more for a head-to-head bet. But what are you seeing?
So it's funny you mentioned the head-to-head portion of it, because when I ran my numbers, he was actually the best head-to-head value. I'm trying to figure out how to say this correctly. He's the best head-to-head value when you don't put him against an opponent. So that would be like matchup agnostic with it. Like just the player that I believe is going to be the safest for their expected price range from a sports book. So, and like the reason why that's important is, there's a lot of matchups that are placed out there from sports books. Like you get different matchups at every single book. That's an important thing to at least talk about, because he's going to most likely be what my model perceives to be the favorite in almost every single matchup that you're going to put him against, or at least the sports books would put him against here. So I think he's undervalued by the casinos. And anytime a player is undervalued by the casinos in a safety head-to-head matchup, it's intriguing to find out if there's a head-to-head matchup. Unfortunately, I think books have been a little sharp this week to where they're kind of trying to shade to where you're not going to end up playing him. Like I've seen him minus 160 in certain matchups. So I kind of had to get cute and creative with it. But I think that there's safety for the reason he's made 5 of his last 6 cuts. All of those finishes have come in the top 40. It's one of the reasons why I believe, like, even if you want to play the safer and you don't have a head-to-head matchup that you can find, look, at plus 110 to come top 40, I mean, that's a little bit, I mean, obviously he has to beat more than half the field, but that's a glorified head-to-head matchup in reality. Like, I mean, like if you can't find an opponent, that's one way to look at it there where you're getting a plus number. So I really like the safety that Taylor Moore brings to the table. I'm hoping with that safety, because this is going to be a tough tournament to score, that maybe he can work himself up the leaderboard and end up winning this at 8 or 9 under par. I don't necessarily, like, there are negative trajectories in my model when I'm looking for upside. That's like the one thing that worried me ever so slightly when I talked about actually winning the event, or when I'm talking about the 16-1 on a top 5. I just think they're number grabs at the end of the day. Like, Taylor Moore should have been a sub 50-1 golfer in this field, and I'm going to grab the number and the value whenever I can find it.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you bring up that he was minus 170, I think you said, in a head-to-head matchup, and then you're seeing him. I think the value there is there's a reason why the book has him at those odds, right? So they're under the impression that Taylor Moore is going to probably have a better weekend than we are probably expecting. I think the value there is to take him top 40. You get plus money on it. It's a little bit safer than doing the head-to-head matchups. But I think you told me on putting him on my card for top 40. I will give Taylor Moore another chance if he misses the cut. I'm not going to be amused with Taylor Moore because he used to do this all the time. Him and Steven Yeager and who else? Smalley, Smotherman drove me crazy last year. Smotherman, I have a bone to pick with that guy, but that could be a whole other, I could do a whole episode on just why Smotherman annoys me. But okay, what else do you have for these smasher passes? Because I have a couple more after this I want to run by.
And the one big thing with Smotherman, he cannot putt. And when the ball striking goes south for him, he will come in dead last place.
I know.
I will give you a double. I'll give you 2 names here. So a double smasher pass. Nick Taylor, top 20 at 3.33-1, and Tyler Duncan, top 20, plus 333 on him also.
Okay. Long week, so I'm forgetting exactly where, but I know that Duncan was popping up for me a lot when I was doing my research. I'm not going to try to look at my screen and find something in my notes. So I'm going to smash Duncan. I'm going to pass on the other option.
Okay, so I guess let's talk about Nick Taylor, of why I like him rather than Duncan thing. Really, like, the way to simplify Duncan, I like his total driving for this course. I think that that's something that can really work for him, and the weighted proximity might be able to play for him. I worry about the around the green game, but that's kind of the very condensed answer of why I like him. Now, with Nick Taylor, it's a very similar answer that I just had given a little bit ago with Steven Yeager. It comes down to the strokes gained total weighted that I ran. He is 7th in my model on this course. So that takes the good drive percentage. That takes the long iron proximity. That takes the around the green numbers. Like, you can kind of see that just through all facets of how I ran the math on him. He's 21st in strokes gained around the green. He's 24th in this field on the Poa Trivialis screens. He's a top 40 player on fast greens. The putter has been inside the top 30 over the last 24 rounds there. And I think he's a really quality par 4 scorer for these ranges that we're looking for here. He's 15th in my model on all these par 4 ranges. And really, like, sure, I mean, there's some difficult ones. I think you're going to have to maintain your score there. But the majority of your holes do come on the par 4s. Like, the dispersion of scoring might not necessarily be most impactful at the par 4s. Like, you're going to need to be able to avoid mistakes on the par 3s, and you're going to be able to make birdies on the par 5s. Those are the 2 big keys to produce totals. But I think the par 4s are equally as important in the sense that any of the ones over 450 yards, there's going to have to be opportunities that you at least salvage a score. 7th in my model from 450 to 500 yards on par 4s. I think there might be a little bit more safety there than meets the eye for a golfer that historically has not been very good at this course. Like, if I'm being frank here, 70th in 2022, miscut in 2021. The 24th in 2020 is more of what I'm hoping he can get to. The miscut in 2019, but just think Nick Taylor's a better player at this point of his career, and I think he's trending in the right direction.
I don't think you're going to sell me on him. This is one I'm going to stand my ground. I will not be putting a Taylor on my card. Maybe I'm going to make a rule against people that have 2 first names. I think that will be part of my model. I think I'm going to come up with my own model that has nothing to do with numbers next week. But yeah, okay. Tell me about Duncan, and then I have 2 that I definitely want to get to because I know that they're getting talked about this week.
Yeah, so Duncan has back-to-back top 40 finishes at this course. He's made his last 3 cuts, highlighted by the 3rd place at the Honda. And just really from a metric standpoint, this course is a very good fit for him. So when I ran it for a generic course from a tee to green perspective, 39th, he's 27th here. The off the tee stuff that I was talking about, he's 7th in my model in strokes gained off the tee over the last 24 rounds. You know, that's a player that's going to find a lot of fairways. I think he's going to have his good drive percentage. That is going to be the one thing that can really lead him here. He's number 1 in my model in good drive percentage over the past 50 rounds. And then really it just comes down to that total driving plus off the tee aggregated number that I put together. 6th in my model there. So if you're telling me that Duncan is a golfer that is going to find a lot of fairways, and then the weighted proximity has him to where he is 27th in my model from weighted proximity, 150 plus yards. That's a really good combination of a golfer. He's going to find fairways. He's going to hit greens, and hopefully he can make a couple putts. And it's kind of the one thing I always say about these difficult courses that play at like 10 under par or less. You don't need to make as many putts to actually win the tournament. It's why guys like Hideki Matsuyama usually thrive at some of these lower scoring tests. Just hoping that the ball striking for Duncan can propel him up the leaderboard and, you know, make enough putts and all of a sudden you start working towards a win.
Love it. All right. One of the guys that obviously, like we mentioned earlier, repeatable, very repeatable win course here. Again, I like things to all come to an end. That's the pessimist in me. I don't think that you can continue on a just total positive winning streak all the time. So Hadwin, I've seen a lot of talk around him. This is where I got with Hadwin. So it's going to be Hadwin top 20, smash or pass. I can get there at top 20. I know he won here before. He's playing very good golf, and I think that's why everyone is all over him this week. 2 missed cuts. Otherwise, he's finished 7th, 12th, and 1st here. So yes, he is the reigning champion. And he's made 10 of 11 cuts this year. So again, playing good golf, coming in good form. He's nearly playing at his career best as far as it comes for a tee to green. And he's top 10 in par 3 scores at this course, right in the field. So I like him at top 20. Where are you at with him?
Let me ask you this question really quickly before I answer that. So have you ever played roulette before?
Yes.
Are you the better that if you've seen it come red like 10 times in a row that you rush over to the table and bet black?
Yeah, obviously.
that's kind of where I lean also with things in general. Like, I know that I know there's green on the board, but I know it's a truly 50-50 thing. But like law of averages says at some point it has to come the other color. But
yes, as much as I'm not the numbers person, listen, I still started med school and did all these, like, there's still some math in this head. As much as you like to see just personality, like it's a numbers game. Statistics are statistics. I don't care what you tell me. So that's why sometimes trends, like I don't love to just be romanticize these trends all the time. So talk to me about where you're at with Hadwin.
I like Hadwin. He is a golfer that I'm going to be trying, if it's possible, to gain exposure from an in-tournament perspective. I don't know if that means from a head-to-head wager or if I can try to find him for an outright, but I love where his numbers are trending right now, and I do believe this is a really good course fit for him. Like from a DFS perspective, I see him as the 2nd most popular player on the board. That's obviously a little bit alarming. I'm probably still going to eat the chalk there and be fine with it just because, I mean, the strokes gained tee to green over the last 24 rounds, he's 6th in my model. Pretty much no matter what statistic I ran for him, he's a top 25 player in almost any iteration of how it was. And that also propelled him to being the 5th ranked player in my model, which we don't get that with Adam Hadwin very frequently. Mm-hmm. And it kind of goes to like the in-tournament head-to-head wagers I'm talking about. He's 3rd in my model for safety. Obviously, the success he's had on this course of winning it and multiple top 15 finishes, that's something that's important to me when I'm looking for safety. Like, yeah, he has thrown in some missed cuts to the mix there, but he's bringing really good form. He's number one in my model in GIR plus around the green. So that's taking the frequency that my model believes the guy should hit a green in regulation, and then the frequency that if he doesn't hit the green in regulation, that he's going to be able to salvage par once he's around the green. That's kind of the safety that I'm looking for. Obviously, water would be the great equalizer to that. If you hit it in water, you can't scramble and save par there. But if you're a top 25 GIR player, I think that you can be able to work around that. And I kind of think the safety is there for him to give us another good finish.
Okay. All right. Another guy, similar feelings on this guy. I try to fade the public. It's also me being a little bit bratty when it comes to betting. You'll see me say this a lot when I'm betting the NFL. If everyone's on one team, I usually go the other way. Justin Suh is another guy that the public loves this week, and for a good reason. I did bet him outright. I got that number way better than what it's sitting at right now, but I think top 10 at plus 360 is still a very solid bet for this guy. He's one of the top 10 long iron players in this field. His last three starts, we're looking at T6, T24, T5, T40. My big concern with him is this is going to be his fifth consecutive week playing. I think that there is sometimes these environmental factors that take, there's something to them with, you see these guys, they're traveling, so be it. And then the next week they don't play as well. He's sixth in the field on approach over the last 20 rounds, 16th in putting. There's a lot of things to like about him. Top 10 in this field in par 3 scorers. Really all over the board, you name it. He's playing very well right now. He gained strokes on the greens, which is normally a weaker part of his game, actually. So he's playing better in areas that we haven't seen him as of late. So where are you at with him?
Yeah, it's kind of the Alex Smalley answer that I was giving with what we see with Justin Suh here. When we look at his strokes gain around the green, 116th in my model over a 2-year running perspective. Over the last 24 rounds, he's 47th. So kind of goes to your point that the short game seems to be cleaning up. And I've kind of been making this argument for the past, even before he officially had his PGA Tour card, like even if we date this back 2 years ago, I've been calling Justin Suh the closest thing I've seen to Jordan Spieth with a putter in hand. I think he's immaculate from outside of 25 feet. I think he makes more putts than expected at the very bare minimum of it. And I wouldn't be surprised if we look at this in the next 5 years. And at some point, Justin Suh led the tour in strokes gain putting. So I love that aspect of his game. I guess the one concern or the couple concerns would come down to what you said. It is his fifth start in a row. There's been a lot of grueling Florida swings into that. I think this is his third Florida tournament with a lot of water. Not the greatest win player in my model, 106th there. I don't know what to think. My model has him 9th overall. I think he has negative trajectory to actually win this event for, certain intangibles that pushed him down my board. Like, it likes him. I don't know if it loves him. I guess I'm going to buck what my model says here, and I'm going to say pass, but maybe that's the pessimist in me that's trying to fade the public of everybody going that direction. And, the upside numbers of my model are saying, I don't know if this is actually what the public thinks he is. But then again, if we're talking about like a top 10 or a top 20 bet, it's probably where he's most doable in reality if you do want to bet him.
Fair. Totally fair. All right. Do you have one more before we start getting into some overrated, underrated for the week?
I guess I actually have a good one.
Oh, no. I don't like the smile that you just gave.
No, I've gone to this guy every single week, and I went to him last week on this show, and it's something near the top of the board here, but let's say from an outright perspective, I got him at 40-1. If you want to talk about a top 20, I think that's in play too, but smash or pass on Brian Harman.
You love him.
I think I do.
He's someone I will say, like, he was another guy that was kind of popping up when I was doing my research, and I think that I can get behind him. I think he's someone, did he finish T5 last year? And I think he has one miscut. I could be mistaken. That's coming off the top of my head.
Yeah, T5 last year, miscut in 2000 or 3 years ago, and then miscut in 5 years ago.
Well done, Steph. All right. Yeah, so I think I will smash him. I don't think I could get there with like a top. he's someone that I probably would flirt with more like the top 40, top 20. I don't know if I could get any. I don't think I could get past top 20.
That's fair, and I'm probably not the person to talk about Brian Harman. I do believe I've probably developed some sort of a fetish with him over the last 6 months.
We don't kink shame on this show. It's fine. It's totally fine. So I think, if you're talking like a top 40, something that I can definitely stand behind, but I don't think I'm getting there outside of an outright.
So I think there's a top 20 at plus 150, I believe is the number. I think that's a doable number. I considered going that route. I didn't end up doing it, but I don't know. To me, Harman is the epitome of, I don't want to say boom or bust, but kind of boom or bust. Like the upside equity in my model just jumps him into a top 5 player. The downside is all these missed cuts and finishes outside the top 40 that we've gotten recently. But I'm kind of willing to ignore some of those recent performances he's had. I just don't think they were prototypical Brian Harman courses. I think this is a much better course fit for him.
That is totally fair. I totally lost my train of thought there, but let's do overrated, underrated. I'm sure it'll come back to me at some point. Who is your overrated player of the week?
All right, let me find somebody. If you have somebody off the top of your head, you can start us off.
Oh, God. I don't want to say it because I think you're not going to be happy with. Oh, actually, no. I know who I'll use as overrated because I lately, as you easily consume golf content on Twitter, it's very easy to see a lot of people's cards. The algorithm shows you. So I see that everyone is on Tommy Fleetwood, and for good reason. He plays well here. He's on approach, around the green, you name it. I'm avoiding him because of his putter. I think his putter sucks right now. I think it's been cold, and it worries me in this situation. And I think that, while he did putt fine here last year, all good things must come to an end, and we are fading Tommy Fleetwood. Anytime I bet him, he does well. I mean, anytime I bet him, he does poorly. If I don't bet him, he does well, so he will probably win this tournament.
I never get Tommy Fleetwood correct. I think the popularity, specifically if we're looking at a DFS perspective here, it's gotten a little bit outrageous. Like, I would rather play Justin Rose if we're directly comparing, and that's similar price, similar ownership. So for that reason, I will have limited exposure to Tommy Fleetwood. My model has him 6th overall, so I don't necessarily hate him, but I think it's just one of those things where you can't play everybody on these boards. And I'd rather either go way up to Justin Thomas, or I'd rather stay where I'm at and take the ownership with Rose or with Hadwin, who I seem to be on this week. So I guess from a game theory perspective, he kind of just doesn't make the cut there. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So I'm out on Tommy Fleetwood, despite how adorable he is and his son is. We are not flowing with Tommy Fleetwood. Who you got for overrated?
So this is another player, kind of with the Tommy Fleetwood thing that you just said, that my model does like this week, but I hate the ownership. And I guess I'm giving this answer from a DFS perspective. And even with that being said, if I think he's overrated for DFS, probably means that you can find some head-to-head matchups against him if I think that there's players around him that might be better. I think the ownership on Ben Griffin has gotten a little bit insane for a golfer that, I don't know, 3 months ago, I don't think anybody really knew who he was. And now all of a sudden he's the darling that, if you look at his recent results, he's churning out top 40 finishes over and over and over again. But I would rather play Taylor Moore. I would rather drop down into players beneath him and go that route. So I just think that the hype around him has gotten a little bit carried away. And then I guess just to throw out one more, if we're trying to find a name that's a little bit lower, which isn't that much lower, I guess, would be Ben On. I think Ben On is a player that you can consider taking on, that the public is liking what he has performed recently and some of the results that he's put together. Not so sure that I actually trust some of those performances from a metric standpoint.
Yeah, and I'm just going to reiterate on Griffin. I'm actually out on him. I debated making that my overrated, actually. I think that people are, he is one of the better ball strikers in this field, and he's one of the better probably Bermuda putters as far as this field goes. My problem with him is he doesn't do anything amazing. He does a lot of things okay or good. And And I just don't love that at a course like this. It just feels like a disaster waiting to happen. It seems like everyone has fallen in love with him very quickly. And now apparently a new rule on the show is I am not betting people that have 2 first names. So he falls into that category, and we are out on Nick Taylor and Ben Griffin. Who's your underrated player of the week?
Can I give one more overrated player just very quickly from a DFS perspective? So in my season-long team, I'm starting him this week, and I don't really feel great about it. Ryan Gerard is like 10% plus owned on DraftKings. There's 8 rounds of statistical data that people are running on him. I would temper expectations a little bit. I'm not saying that he can't produce and he can't continue it. Like, obviously, I'm starting him. I just don't know if this 10% thing from him makes a lot of sense. Like, it's another golfer that legitimately 1 month ago, I don't know if people knew who he was.
Yeah, I'm with you.
All right, Stephie, I will give you, I mean, I guess this is a very simple answer for me. Like, I'm going to give the Steven Yeager, Taylor Moore sort of an answer. If those are the 2 guys that I am most exposed to. Obviously, I really like Tyler Duncan for all the reasons I talked about, but I've talked about those players enough. Let me give a wild card all the way down the board that I have heard nobody talk about this week that you can get extremely funky with a bet with him. Augusto Nunez. That is a player that I have heard nobody talk about. He's sub 1% when it comes to DraftKings here. And I don't know if I necessarily trust the data, but we're talking about a golfer that if we're starting from the beginning of this year, he's made 4 of his last 5 cuts. Look, I mean, he's so cheap. You don't need much from him. Like, whether it's a top 40 bet, which is more of where I'd be playing it, or you want to throw him into some DraftKings lineups at his $6,600 price tag, I think you could do a lot worse than him.
I like that. I'm going to fire off a couple I want to make sure I get the accurate odds on here. So a couple like guys that I think are definitely underrated this week, which I'm starting to see him get a little bit more love, but Victor Perez, you can get him top 20, looking at plus 275, top 40, plus 130. A lot of people haven't heard of him because he's just killing it on the DP World Tour. His last 4 starts over there, he finished T12, a win, T28, T13. He gained strokes putting in 5 straight starts, and he's fantastic off the tee recently. I think he could come here to a weaker field and, easily find himself in the top 40. Another guy, Dylan Wu, top 20, plus 460. I think I have him on my card at top 40. Ben Taylor, who I think Kirshner has now, he's not as underrated because I know Kirshner is on him as well. Ben Taylor just got married. I took him at top 30 plus 275. Have flirted with the idea of taking him top 20 plus 500. I wish he was a little bit more consistent, but he has 3 top 5 finishes this year in his past 50 rounds. He's 3rd in the field for strokes gained putting on Bermuda, 19th in strokes gained total, 3rd in strokes, you name it. He's in a good spot, so I feel comfortable with him that he can at least finish there within the top 30. And then my last one, I tweeted about him this morning. I tried not to put him on my card. I hate betting this guy. He always breaks my heart, but Neesmith. I have to do it. He was popping up everywhere. I don't think this course is a horrible fit for him. His last 2 appearances here, T3, T21. He's top 10 in par 3 scorers, top 10 in strokes gained total, top 10 in par 3 scorers, you name it. He's in a really good spot. And I think he is doing a lot of the things I've been looking for this week. So I am cool with taking Neesmith this week. I won't get there with an outright, but I will get there with a top 20.
I think a top 20 on Neesmith is probably the best way to play him. And I'm talking about like the entire encapsulation of anything that you can talk about here, because I am completely out for DFS. I think there's way too much volatility at the ownership that he's bringing. He has that trajectory in my model to where the upside looks good. The floor is sunk into the floor of what you might potentially get from him. So I would prefer to bet on that top 20 upside and kind of avoid him elsewhere there. And I was very surprised about Victor Perez. He's a golfer that I don't think people are wanting to back this week just because they're unaware of who he is, I guess, because he does do so much of his work on the DP World Tour. But my model also liked him, and it usually doesn't like these European players that come in. So I'm going to say yes to Victor Perez in pretty much any capacity that anybody wants to play him out there.
I love it. I think we gave a lot of really solid. This week, we gave a lot of names I don't think everyone has been talking about as much. You know what time it is. Wrapping the show up. Who's your daddy? One and done. You're going to hate mine, and I love it. I'm hoping to keep this streak alive and beat you again this week. Who are you looking at?
Well, Stephie, you can go first. You won last week. Let's do it that way. The winner will go first.
And it's going to be, and I told you I'm going to keep betting this guy when, despite him being a favorite for this tournament, I still think maybe he's getting a little bit disrespected, and that's Jordan Spieth. I'm doing it. This course calls for strategy. I love Spieth in this creative situation. He will get the job done, even if it's not even the cleanest hit. It's going to be creative, and he's going to find ways to, he won here, in 2015. This is a good opportunity for him to put everything together. With that, I'm worried about him scrambling. So this could fall. This could be a disaster. This could end up being absolutely awful. I think that him walking towards this thing he's doing where he thinks he's going to miss and then walks towards the ball, I think his confidence is coming back. I think he's getting a little bit of that Jordan Spieth swagger. It was really interesting to listen to him talk about Scheffler too at the end of the Players there. His last 4 appearances, was he looking at T19, T4, a miscut, T6. He lost that approach once in those rounds since Waste Management. And honestly, his iron play has been awesome. He's averaging plus a little bit over 1 stroke on approach last 4 starts. There's not as much water, which makes me feel more comfortable with him, that he will have the opportunity to save par in those situations. And his putting is slowly improving. I'm not saying it's good. It's slowly getting there. And maybe in this a little bit weaker field, the course history, with the confidence coming back, I like his odds here. He's someone that I did bet outright. He's got 3 top 20s and a win here. So I'm taking Jordan Spieth this week.
So I think Jordan Spieth on this surface in particular has shown some of that putting acumen that you would hope to see. And if he makes putts, obviously, if we're talking pure win equity standpoint, no matter how you want to shake it, he's a top 5 win equity player in this field. Yeah. And here's where this is going to get interesting this week.
I know who you're taking.
Who do you think I'm taking?
JT.
Yeah, so I have a head-to-head bet, which is the funny part about this. I have Justin Thomas minus 120 against Jordan Spieth in a tournament-long matchup here. So I will now have even more interest in Justin Thomas beating Jordan Spieth than I did originally. And it just really comes down to the upside of what I think he's presenting here compared to the rest of the field. He is a golfer that has been a little bit underappreciated from what he's actually done this year. I know everybody wants to say Justin Thomas does not look like prototypical Justin Thomas. Sure, you could make that argument. It's just the putter. And it's kind of the same argument that you just gave for Jordan Spieth. If Justin Thomas can make putts here, he can win this golf tournament. And if you're telling me the winning score is going to be between 8 under to 12 under, he now doesn't need to make as many putts. And we can use that ball striking acumen that he brings to the table. So I think Thomas's potential compared to every other golfer in this field is night and day. Like when I ran this, and you don't always give this answer, like this isn't always something that comes into play for me. Thomas is like, I have a power rating on every single player. Like the power rating number is hidden in my model. You obviously see that he is number 1 in my model if you use it, but you don't see what the power rating is. He was so far and above every other player in this field, like substantially so, more so than I've seen in really any golf tournament over the past year of me doing this probably. So I think Thomas finally gets his feet out of the quicksand here. I think he makes a run to win this title. And I think on Sunday, Jordan Spieth can come in 5th place if he wants to. That's fine. But I'm going to say this is Justin Thomas's week that he finally gets back into the winner's circle.
And like I said, we saw with Christian Kirk do this with the Honda. He's skipping the next tournament. He thinks he has a good chance here. I like the confidence. I think really between Thomas and Spieth, they're some of the top players in the world that can only beat themselves. So it's going to come down to them putting it together and playing very, complementary golf here. And this is a course that he's done well, right? I think his putter prevented him from a playoff between Burns and Riley. And he has, you know what? Every week that I bet JT, though, he does not win. And I love JT, and I have a soft spot for him. But I'm going to go with this frenemy, which is hilarious that we're doing it this way. But I think that's a good way to. Any last notes before we sign off?
No, Stephie, I appreciate you doing the show again. I look forward to match play, actually doing a match play episode next week. That should be a super fun episode for us. And no, good luck to everybody out there that's placing wagers.
Yes, absolutely. And if you like college basketball, we have a very new fun game. We just launched it in Spicy Slips. College basketball is a part of it now. Live prop games. It's a blast. I sat on there yesterday and lost money that I did not need to lose. I'll sneak in here that if you use the code Spicy Smalls, it gets you a deposit bonus. But we'll see you guys next week for match play. Thanks again, Spencer, and good luck, everyone.